Welcome to the Prophecy Club. We're going to switch gears today. We're going to be playing the audio of the Islamic Conquest. However, that is still part of an amazing deal that we have going for you. Here's what we're going to do. If you get one DVD, we're going to give you 3 more. This is really a great offer. I can just tell you that right up front. And if you don't get this, then you are just missing out. Here's the deal. We're going to give you 3 free DVDs if you just get one. And what I'm about to play is part of the one that we'll ask you to get. It's called the Islamic Conquest. There's a lot of folks out there that are all tangled up about where the Antichrist is going to come from, who the false prophet is, and there's so much foolishness out there. I can't even believe. I don't know where they come up with this silliness that says the Antichrist is going to come from America. Well, book, chapter, and verse, please. It just doesn't happen. It's just not in the Bible. Okay, it's just not. Okay, so what does the Bible say about where does the Antichrist come from? All right, so that's the first DVD. Then we're also going to throw in Islam and Bible Prophecy. That's my brand new DVD I just made here recently on Islam and Bible Prophecy, where I go through having dug up all of the scriptures for you to show you all of the secrets about what's going to happen with Islam and Bible Prophecy. In other words, one day, does Islam take over America? Is that where the beheading comes from? Well, I explain that. Then we have Bill Federer explaining Islamic Conquest. He goes in and explains the background of the history on Islam, who they are, and if you know the history, then you pretty much know where they're going to go, right? Then one of my favorite, Israel, Islam, and Biochemical Warfare by Bill Sneblin. It's a wonderful DVD. You get 4 wonderful DVDs valued at $120, all for a gift to the ministry of just $30. That's right. Get one, and we're going to give you 3 free. And it's called the Islam Gift Offer. Now let's go on over and listen to the audio of the DVD by Scott Dreyer called The Rise of the Islamic Antichrist and False Prophet. And here's why you need to get it. There's a lot of people out there that think, oh, well, there's good Muslims and bad Muslims. There's moderate Muslims, and then there's radical Muslims. And there's other people that think having a mosque in their neighborhood is just being tolerant of other religions, just like we do with the Mormons or with the Buddhists. I mean, they're not going to really harm us. Most people think, oh, well, Muslims are not going to hurt us. Muslims are not all that bad, being a Muslim, having Muslims around. Is that true? Most people think a mosque is just another church. Is that true? Let me just tell you, the greatest enemy for Christianity and Christians, well, I won't answer that. I'll just let you hear that from a person that really knows it. We're about to listen to Bill Federer. This guy's author of several books, and he's an expert on Islam, Muslims, what they believe, and I think you're really going to find this interesting, and you got to get the DVD set. Again, we're going to give you 3 free DVDs if you just get one DVD. I'll tell you more about it at the end.
Gets offended if the second Jewish tribe confiscates their property and chases them out of town. And this set a precedent in Islam called hudna. It's their word for treaty. It means when you are weak, you make treaties until you get strong enough to disregard them. So here you are. When he first came to Medina, he was weak. He was a refugee. And then he goes into the minority neighborhoods and he organizes, he gets a following, and they make a treaty with him. Right? So when he was weak, he made the treaty. Now it's 5 years later. He just chased away the Meccans, the only people that could help these Jews, and now he's in a position of strength. He finds a reason to break the treaty and chase them out. So when you're weak, you make treaties until you get strong enough to disregard them. And so here we are twisting Israel's arm to make a treaty with the surrounding Muslim countries when their concept of treaty is to restock missiles. You know, it's just a temporary thing. That third Jewish tribe in Medina, Muhammad bottles them in their neighborhood for 25 days. When he finally conquers them, he is the Quran says that, or the Hadith says he was taking a bath and a spirit appeared to him and said, "How can you rest when Allah's enemies are in your midst?" He said, "Where?" And the spirit pointed toward the Jewish neighborhood. And so he took his army, surrounded the Jewish neighborhood. After 25 days, they surrendered, and then he brought them into the market and chopped off their heads. So 600 or 700 of them had their heads chopped off. and he sold the women and children into slavery. He did keep one of the wives for himself, Rehana, and he ended up having anywhere from 11 to 22 wives and slave wives and concubines and so forth. But we see slavery was one of the main ways that Islam was financed for nearly 1,400 years. They enslaved an estimated 180 million Africans in the 1,400 years of Islam. Muhammad was an Arab. He was white. The hadiths talk about how he would lift his arms in prayer and they could see the whiteness of his armpits. And they were going to early morning prayer, and a guy's donkey rubbed up against the prophet's thigh, and he says, I saw the whiteness of the prophet's thigh. Muhammad was a white Arab, and he owned African slaves. And so they enslaved an estimated 180 million Africans. There's one word in Arabic for African and slave. It's abd. A-B-D means level with the earth. And they enslaved an estimated 1 or 2 million Europeans. And so there were entire Catholic orders in Europe during the Middle Ages called the Trinitarians, and the head of the order was called the ransomer. And they would collect alms and donations and go under a white flag to North Africa to try to get your friend back. Matter of fact, the Muslims captured one of the pilgrim ships. In 1625, the pilgrims had a boat filled with 800 pounds of beaver skins and dried fish, and they sent it back to England to trade for supplies. And William Bradford writes in the history of the Plymouth settlement that the ship made it happily across the Atlantic, and they were well within the English Channel when a Turkish man of war captured one of the ships, took it to Morocco, and sold the crew into slavery. Around 1627, the Muslims captured an entire Irish village, the stolen village of Baltimore, Ireland. Came up at nighttime, killed a bunch of them, rounded up the whole rest of the town, and took them captive to Morocco. And only 2 ever made it back. And then around 1630, they captured 400 from Reykjavik, Iceland, took them down to Morocco and sold them into slavery. And so this was a scourge that took place. And since Muhammad robbed the caravans, they figured it was okay to rob the ships. And anyway, within 5 years of Muhammad immigrating to the Jewish city of Medina, there's not a Jew left in the city of Medina. They were either chased out, killed, or enslaved. And so we see that there's a 3-step process. Sort of like Caesar's 3 steps, Vini, Vivi, Vici, I came, I saw, I conquered. Muhammad's 3 steps was immigrate, increase, eliminate. So he came to the Jewish city of Medina as an immigrant. He was a religious immigrant. And then he increased the number of his followers amongst the minorities, and he got involved in politics. And then he eliminated the previous culture, and that's when he became militant. And so this process of immigrating as a religious person, increasing and getting involved in politics, increasing your followers, and then eliminating the previous culture and violence breaking out, this process has been used for hundreds of years by Islam. So we look at Europe. Europe used to all be Judeo-Christian, right? Catholic, and then a Protestant Reformation, and then had Jewish neighborhoods in every town. Matter of fact, the Jewish neighborhoods were called ghettos. That's what the name of their neighborhood was. And but Europe was almost 100% Judeo-Christian. Now, they didn't always live up to it, and they had terrible wars, but they had these verses bothering their conscience that would say things like, you're all equal in the eyes of a creator and do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But then Europe went from that to neutral, the French Revolution. There was a guy named Voltaire, with his brilliant wit, would mock traditional religion. And then there was Robespierre, who put a prostitute in Notre Dame Cathedral, covered her with a sheet, and said, this is the goddess of reason, let's worship her. And then it was Napoleon that spread this, and they chopped off 40,000 heads in Paris. And then it was Napoleon that spread this French infidelity, this French secularism all around Europe. And Europe became secular. And so the theme song for a secular Europe is what? It very well could be John Lennon's Imagine. Remember that song? Imagine there's no heaven, it's easy if you try. And then a line in the song that says, nothing to kill and die for, and no religion too. Right? So once you've achieved this secular utopia in Europe, nobody's going to kill and die to defend it. And so they've lost their ability to discriminate, and they say, well, bring in whatever you want. And so into Europe comes all these beliefs, and now coming in is Sharia law Islam. And it's slamming the car into reverse, saying that you can kill your daughter if she gets too westernized. You can call Jews apes and pigs and beat your wife. And so the Europeans are wondering how they got there. And it's interesting, Europe is very socialist. The government pays for their health care, their welfare, their retirement, but they're having fewer kids, plus abortion. So who's going to work the jobs to pay the taxes for all these retiree entitlement programs? Immigrants. They open the door. 70% of immigrants into Europe are Muslim. 50 million of them, and they are having on the average 8 kids per family. And so in 20 years, there will be 100 million Muslims in Europe. And now they're finding out that they are the number one group signing up for welfare. And so the Europeans, they're setting up their wives and their harems, and they're getting welfare. And so the Europeans are financing their own Islamification. And so we see in Germany, the Chancellor, Angela Merkel, said, the beginning of the 1960s, our country called for foreign workers to come to Germany because after World War II, there was a whole lot of men that were killed. And so they needed workers. And so she says, we kidded ourselves for a while. We said they won't stay, but this isn't reality. The approach to build a multicultural society has failed, utterly failed. And 10 years ago, there were 3 mosques in Germany. Today, they're building over 200. I was in Berlin this summer, and 10% of Berlin, Germany, is Turkish Muslim. Kreuzerplatz in these different areas. And they're establishing no-go zones where the police won't protect you if you go into those neighborhoods. You're sort of on your own. And turns out multiculturalism is the AIDS virus of Western civilization. I say that again slower. Multiculturalism is the AIDS virus of Western civilization. What do you mean? Well, if you have a healthy immune system and something comes in that's a virus, your white blood cells attack it and says, not here. We're not going to let you in. But if you have AIDS, the virus comes in and your white blood cells stand there and let that thing grow until it gets to threaten the life of the body. Well, you have a body politic, right? And you have a certain way that you have elevated the treatment of women, and Islam comes in and says, well, we're going to allow men to beat their wives. We're going to allow men to have polygamy. We're going to allow them to have 6-year-olds wives. We're going to allow them to divorce their wives simply by saying, I divorce you. And the woman can never divorce the husband. And we're going to allow this in. And a normal, healthy Western culture says, sorry, you're not going to do that in our country. But if you've got multiculturalism and diversity and pluralism, you say, well, I guess I got to let you do your own thing. And so then they begin to grow, and house by house, and street by street, neighborhood by neighborhood, city by city, until they finally take over a huge area. In France, there are 751 no-go zones around Paris. 5 million Muslims, and the police have basically given up trying to rule there. And so they simply practice their own Sharia law in those neighborhoods. And then we see in Britain, they've designated 12 cities, neighborhoods around there to be independent Islamic emirates. We're talking Birmingham, Liverpool, Manchester, and they're just putting up signs saying Sharia law practice here, so ladies, think twice before you go in there. You better have a scarf to cover your head. And the number one name for newborns in London is Mohammed. And sort of shows you the Anglican denomination in their bylaws. They said that if they ever have to sell a church or cathedral, that they won't sell it to another Christian denomination. And so they sell it to business clubs and health clubs and office buildings and mosques. So in these little, English towns and so forth where, populations, the church attendance dwindles until nobody's going there. Then so let's sell the thing, and then they sell it to the Muslims. So you go to this nice, quaint little English village in the middle of town. The English little chapel has a crescent on top. So the Prime Minister in England, David Cameron, said, under the doctrine of state multiculturalism, we have encouraged different cultures to live separate lives apart from each other. We have even tolerated these segregated communities behaving in ways that run counter to our values. Belgium, 20% of Brussels is now Muslim. And the number one name for newborns in Brussels is Mohammed. And they have no-go zones and districts, and the police officers are frequently pelted with rocks. Italy, Muslims have taken over the Piazza Venezia for their public prayers, and the Pope allowed them to build a mosque, great big huge mosque, biggest one in Europe, and he only asked in return that they let the Catholic Church build a church in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and they have yet to give permission for that. Anyway, in Netherlands, there are 40 no-go zones. In Holland, we're talking Amsterdam and Rotterdam and Utrecht, have all these neighborhoods. Most of southern Holland is now Moroccan Muslim. And here is the Hudson, New York, has the August 11th. It says, Dutch government says it will abandon the long-standing model of multiculturalism that has encouraged Muslim immigrants to create a parallel society within the Netherlands. Dutch Interior Minister Donner said, Dutch government will distance itself from the relativism contained in the model of a multicultural society. I asked people, do all cultures value human life the same? Well, they don't, right? Which one values them the most? Well, Judeo-Christian, because you're made in the image of the Creator. And anyway, Sweden, 25% of Malmö, Sweden, is now Muslim. And they have no-go zones. In Gothenburg district, Muslim youth have hurled petrol bombs and point lasers at the police. The Angered district, more than 15 police cars destroyed. Rosengård district, fire and emergency workers refused to go into Muslim neighborhoods without a police escort, because while they're putting out the fires, the Muslims are attacking them. And the number one crime in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark is what? Rape. Muslim immigrant men raping European women. Here's November 7, 2011, Norwegian newspaper. It says, back in May, it was reported that every rape assault in the city of Oslo in the last 5 years had been committed by a person with a non-Western background, a Norwegian euphemism for Muslim. Now it turns out that there have been already twice as many rape assaults in Oslo so far this year. And so we see that there are blonde-haired Swedish girls dyeing their hair black so they won't get targeted and raped. Some Swedish girls actually made a chastity belt that takes 2 hands to take off so they get a chance to at least hit their attacker. So it's a brilliant strategy. You take advantage of the diversity, multicultural, and freedom of religion to move in, and then you begin to organize and take over politically, neighborhood by neighborhood, city by city, and county by county, until you get a huge area like Chechnya, and you demand to be an independent Islamic country, and if not, you blow up schools and subways. And so we see the process is immigrate, increase, eliminate. Immigrate as a religious person, increase politically, and then eliminate militarily. Now, do most Muslims know this? No, they don't. Most Muslims don't know their own history. Most Muslims don't know their own Quran. Most Muslims just believe whatever their imam tells them. And they just come because it's a better life for them. But the brilliant design of this system is it works without them thinking about it. Right? So they come in and, you think of why do certain people vote for the different political candidates. And the reason they vote for those different political candidates is they think that it'll help their job. And so you have some candidates voting for parties that will maybe push abortion and gun control and take away their hunting rights and EPA restrictions on their fishing rights and export jobs. But they don't think of that. They just think that they're told that it'll help their job. And so we see that a lot of them, different Muslim groups move into a neighborhood just because they think it's better for them personally. They don't think of the whole great big picture. Does that make sense? And then, so they move in, but once they move in, what's the natural tendency is you gravitate toward getting together with people that you're familiar with and you're similar to. And so they gravitate together into communities. And then what happens is they get an imam. And the imam says, okay, now that you're here, we need to start following the Quran closer. And ladies start wearing the veils and the burqas, the hijabs, and don't be close friends with the kafir infidels, and don't eat the haram food, just the halal food. And as they become more visible, people see more of these veils and burqas, they think, oh, my neighborhood's changing. And so they begin to move out. And then the property values go down, and then more Muslims move in, and then those that refuse to move out, that's when violence takes place. And there's no witnesses, because no Muslim will testify against another Muslim on behalf of a kafir infidel. And so we see that the process is immigrate, increase, eliminate. You immigrate as a religious person, then they increase the number of their followers, and they begin to get political, and then they want to eliminate the previous culture, neighborhood by neighborhood, block by block, city by city, until they can take over a huge area. It's a very effective strategy, and we see it working and playing out right in front of us. Matter of fact, there are some imams that encourage violence, and because when there are more rapes, people do move out quicker, and then they're able to take over the neighborhood quicker. And so, anyway, it is the pattern that Muhammad used when he first went to Medina. So immigrate, increase, eliminate. And we see that happening before our eyes in Europe. So this is beginning to take place in America. And as I mentioned, we see this in neighborhoods, and our government is facilitating it. So our government is helping to give special loans and rates and immigration help and so forth as they move in. Now, we see another dynamic, and there's an unholy alliance between the radical left and the radical Muslim. So the typical ACLU, atheist, homosexual agenda that wants to prohibit public Judeo-Christian expression, they see an alliance with the fundamentalist Muslim countries that prohibit public Judeo-Christian expression. And so they don't like it, you don't like it, so they work together, not realizing that if and when Islam takes over, they have no problem getting rid of the first group. But unfortunately, those can't see that far, and it's taking place in front of our eyes. So here's a cartoon or an illustration of Islam and liberalism are helping Western civilization to commit suicide. So when Muslims take over a neighborhood, they institute Sharia law. What is Sharia law? Sharia law is trying to be like Muhammad. And so Muhammad was the perfect Muslim, and so his life is the sunnah, the way, the example, and fundamental Muslims want to imitate Muhammad. So Christians want to imitate Jesus, Muslims want to imitate Muhammad. Now, I want to make it clear that Christians imitate Jesus, but they don't think they're earning their salvation by imitating Jesus. You believe you're saved by believing Jesus died on the cross to pay for your sins. Now, once you believe that, you want to let Christ shine through you to a dying world. And so you want to be like Jesus because you want people to see Jesus in you and want your Jesus. And so, but you don't think that by trying to imitate every single thing that he did, that you're somehow earning your salvation. Does that make sense? Not so in Islam. They think that by imitating Muhammad, they are getting close to earning their salvation. So if one keeps Sharia law, they may or may not be admitted to paradise. They never know. Even Muhammad did not know what was going to happen to him. Here's in the hadith, it says, "By Allah, though I'm the prophet of Allah, I do not know what Allah will do with me." The promise of paradise is only for those that die in jihad. So Islam is a religion of works. You may be familiar with that concept. You must obey Allah, but how do you know how to obey Allah? Muhammad's life. So Muhammad was the perfect Muslim. And so there's no fall and redemption theme. There's no, I blew it, I'm going to ask Allah to forgive me. You don't ask Allah to forgive you. You just obey, and you never know if you obeyed enough. So here's Pope John Paul. He even commented in Crossing the Threshold of Hope in 1995, Islam is not a religion of redemption. There is no room for the cross and the resurrection. The tragedy of redemption is completely absent. The God of the Quran is outside of the world, a God who is only majesty, never Emmanuel, God with us. Not only the theology, but the anthropology of Islam is very distant from Christianity. Right? So the Christian theme all through it is Adam and Eve sinned. The first thing they did was they put on fig leaves. That was the first church of the fig leaf. It was a church of works. God says fig leaves aren't going to cut it, and God took an animal and killed it, and he made coats of skins. Right? And they covered them with it. So how do you make a coat of skin? You have to kill some. Well, do you think God did it on the other side of the garden and brought it to them all nice and tailored? Or do you think he killed it right in front of them and they witnessed the first death, that this innocent animal dies? And maybe those skins still had a little blood on them and they were covered with the blood, right? And so God is saying, okay, I made this for you. I provided this lamb, this animal, and now you and I can be in fellowship, right? Now I still have to go through this 2,000-year plan of redemption, but nevertheless, the idea is you're on one side, God's on the other. Your sin separates you from God. This innocent animal gives its life. And so they tell the story to Cain and Abel. And Cain it gets to the age, and he wants to worship God. So what does he do? He brings the work of his hands from the field. And so he sort of breaks off the church of the fig leaf, and he has the church of the fruits and the nuts. And so his is a one of works. But what does Abel do? He takes an innocent lamb from the flock and sacrifices it and says, okay, I'm here, God's here, I got sin in between, but this innocent animal pays for the sin. And so this symbolism is seen throughout the whole Old Testament, where Abraham, is going to worship God, and there's Isaac, and God says, no, I provided the ram, so I sacrificed the ram. And then Moses, man's on one side, and God's there in the pillar of fire by night and cloud by day. And then there's the tabernacle, and there's the interesting, beautiful symbolism is that the presence of the Lord was on top of the ark. The angels, the two angels when their wings were touching, and And inside of the ark was what? Well, Aaron's rod that budded and pot of manna and the Ten Commandments. So here, let's look at this picture. Here's God up here, and he's looking down below the ark, and there's the Ten Commandments, and then he sees all these sinners. And then what happens? The high priest takes the blood of the lamb, and he sprinkles it on the mercy seat, which is a plate that's between God and the law.
Okay, I hate to have to interrupt him. As you can tell, he's got some really good stuff, but I want to tell you about this offer. You really want to get this. Here's the scoop. If you get one DVD from us, just one, we're going to give you 3 other DVDs. Last time I checked, that's really, really good, okay? Here's the deal. If you get the DVD you've been listening to, it's called The Islamic Conquest. And in this DVD, Bill Federer essentially shows you over a 1,400 year the patterns that Muslims and Islam follows. And by knowing their past performance, you can know what their future actions are going to be. So if you want to know the truth about Islam and what Muslims do and what they're going to do in this nation, this is your DVD. Then we're going to give you my new DVD, 2 hours and 40 minutes, Islam in Bible Prophecy. Also, Islamic Conquest by Bill Federer. Bill goes through and helps you to understand the history of Islam and where they're really going. I mean, that's what it's really talking about. And The Rise of the Islamic Antichrist and False Prophet by Scott Dreyer. And essentially, it's making a case for where the Antichrist and the false prophet come from. And then Bill Sneblin's Israel, Islam, and Biochemical Warfare. So we tie it all together. You get 4 DVDs valued at $120, all for a gift to the ministry of just $30. And of course, coming off of the summer slump, we could frankly really use it. So what we'd like you to do is call 785-266-1112. That's 785-266-1112. Grab your cell phone and call in and get the Islamic gift offer. A gift of $30 gets you 4 DVDs. Really, really, you'll be well informed on Islam and what's going on. 4 DVDs, and you can also go to prophecyclub.com and just click on the Islamic gift offer. Got to call now, 785-266-1112 or prophecyclub.com. Now, I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much for listening to this radio program, and thank you for your prayers and your gifts of support. God bless. Now from the Prophecy Club, some exciting opportunities for you. In The Hidden Partnership of America and Nazi Germany, Doug Woodward tells the story of how America immigrated tens of thousands of German Nazi war criminals after World War II who set up the modern eugenics and mind control programs that today are causing the wild shooting rampages like we saw in Aurora and Newtown. In today's plot to make men God, Doug ties the American and German eugenics programs to modern transhumanism, the incursion of angelic DNA into the human genome, meaning an injection to fix your DNA. It is the extraterrestrial tampering of the human genome, producing an alien human hybrid body for the Antichrist to occupy and cause the strong delusion. Get both DVDs valued at $60 in the Woodward gift offer for a gift of $40 or more. Remember, Prophecy Club continues because of your prayers and gifts of support, not the distribution of DVDs. There are 30 scriptures in the Bible which say in the last days massive amounts of oil will be discovered in Israel, and we believe we've been given the directive to use this prophesied oil and gas to fund worldwide soul winning. If you have questions about our vision, call 877-OIL-ISRAEL or 877-645-4772.